It started with scrambled eggs and ended with a betrayal caught on camera. Paul, a dedicated architect, gave his all to a marriage crumbling beneath his feet. But when his wife's lies were exposed in 1080p, he didn't fall apart. He rose from the ashes, transformed. And just when she came crawling back, begging for a second chance, she found someone else in his kitchen. It began over breakfast, scrambled eggs, silence, and a comment that cut deeper than anything Paul expected before 9 a.m. Lisa sat across from him at the kitchen table, legs crossed, scrolling on her phone like he wasn't even there. She didn't look up when she said it. "You know what's embarrassing?" she asked casually, as if they were discussing weather. "Showing up to the reunion in that rust bucket while Sherry's boyfriend let her drive his RS7. Paul paused mid-chew, unsure if it was a joke. Her tone wasn't playful. It was clinical. She glanced up briefly. "Your car," she added. "God, Paul, that thing barely has mirrors." People stared. It wasn't the insult itself that hit him. It was the way she delivered it. Sharp, practiced, like she'd been waiting to let it out. Paul set his fork down, stunned. This wasn't about the car. Not really, that was just the excuse. What she meant was, "You're not enough anymore." Lisa didn't give him time to respond. She stood, stretched, and added, "Anyway, I told Sherry I'd ride along while she test drives the RS7 again." Then she walked out, her half-eaten breakfast still on the table. Paul stayed seated, staring at the place she'd just vacated. The house was quiet, too quiet. He'd designed this space himself, picked the cabinets, installed the lighting, poured his weekends into every corner, and yet somehow it no longer felt like his. It felt like a waiting room. That morning wasn't about breakfast or vehicles. It was a shift, a moment that peeled back the surface of their marriage to reveal something hollow underneath. Paul had always believed in the value of consistency. He showed up. He paid the bills. He never forgot an anniversary. But recently it seemed Lisa saw those things not as strengths, but as signs he'd given up. In the weeks that followed, he noticed more. Her late nights, the texts that made her smirk. Never shared, always guarded. When he tried to celebrate landing a major project, the Civic Center downtown, she barely looked at the proposal, just mumbled a congratulations, thumb still tapping her screen. "You've been smiling at your phone a lot lately," he said one night. She didn't deny it, just raised an eyebrow. "Jealous?" "No," he lied, "just curious." "Don't be," she said, standing up and walking away. That was the pattern: distance, shrugs. Vague excuses. She used to call him when she was running late. Now she texted at work with no context. She used to ask how his day was. Now she came home smelling like cologne that wasn't his. He noticed, but he didn't confront her, because somewhere along the way, Paul stopped believing a confrontation would fix anything. You can't force someone to stay curious about you. He cooked her favorite dinner, chicken piccata. She didn't show, said she was at happy hour. When she finally stumbled in past midnight, she didn't even seem surprised to find him awake. "You're still up?" "Yeah," he said, closing his laptop. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." That was all. No questions, no explanations, just silence thick enough to bruise. Then came the note. "Girls' party," it read, scribbled on a sticky note, left on the counter like a receipt. He sat at the kitchen table that night, not watching TV, not eating, just letting the fridge hum fill the air. At 5:47 a.m., he opened the doorbell camera app, something he'd never done before. And there it was, timestamp 5:22 a.m., the RS7 gliding into the driveway. Lisa stepping out barefoot, heels in hand, laughing. A man climbed out after her, tall, expensive looking. She touched his arm, then she kissed him. Not a goodbye, not a thank you. A kiss that says, "You matter more to me than where I'm going next." Paul didn't cry, didn't rage. He just sat in the dark, phone in hand, heart slowing to something cold. That kiss told him what the last few months had tried to hide. She'd left the marriage long before she walked through that door, and now so would he. The next morning, Paul wasn't tired. Sleep had been pointless. He sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Lisa once rolled her eyes at his practical car, letting everything settle. The betrayal wasn't abstract anymore. It had a timestamp, a license plate, a kiss. At 8:16 a.m., the RS-7 pulled up again. Same smooth stop, same quiet confidence. The man stepped out, sunglasses on, moving like he belonged there. Paul didn't think. He opened the door, walked across the lawn. The man looked up when Paul was 10 feet away, smirked. "Paul, right?" "Yeah," Paul said. "And you're the guy kissing my wife at 5 in the morning." The man took off his sunglasses slowly, no panic in his eyes. "She said it wasn't serious, that you two were just coasting." Paul's fist clenched. "She's my wife." The guy shrugged. "Then maybe you should have treated her like she mattered." Paul didn't respond, not with words. His fist moved before he could stop it, connecting hard. The guy staggered, swore, swung back. They went down on the lawn, two grown men brawling in the quiet of suburbia. Fists, grass, curses, someone yelled. A dog barked. A neighbor peeked from behind a curtain. Someone called the cops. By the time sirens approached, Paul had stopped. He stood, breathing hard, knuckles raw. The other guy, bleeding lip, tried to provoke him again. "You really think this is about me?" he sneered. "You were already gone, man. I just gave her a ride." The words hurt more than the fight. A ride, like he'd been a placeholder in his own marriage. The police asked if he wanted to press charges. Paul shook his head. "No, we've both made our point." Later, Paul sat alone on the porch, hands resting on his knees, the adrenaline fading. Not regret, just clarity. He'd crossed a line, but it hadn't felt wrong. It had felt overdue. That week, Paul buried himself in work, not to distract himself, this time, to rebuild. He spread his civic center plans across the dining table. Notes everywhere. No more waiting for Lisa's approval. No more hoping for her attention. He uploaded the design to an online platform for architects, a niche place where vision mattered more than resumes. Then he forgot about it. Days passed. Lisa didn't text, didn't come home. She'd asked for space. He didn't fill it with begging. He let it stretch. 3 mornings later, his phone buzzed. "Your submission has been featured." The post went viral. 3,000 shares by noon. 5 blogs requesting interviews. A donor in Seattle called. He wanted Paul to lead the project, fully funded. It all happened fast. Zoom calls, paperwork, real money in the account. But Paul didn't celebrate with champagne or revenge. He bought himself a set of new pencils, the kind he'd wanted years ago, but couldn't justify. Then on impulse, he drove past the luxury dealership Lisa once mentioned. He'd never gone in before. This time, he pulled in without hesitation. He chose a matte gray coupe. Quiet, confident, no chrome, no flash. When he drove it home, he didn't park in the garage. He left it in the driveway, visible, unapologetic. He didn't do it for Lisa. He did it for the man who once thought being dependable was enough. This was for him. Inside, the house felt less like a home and more like a museum of what had been. Paul didn't unpack. He sat for a few hours drinking coffee, listening to nothing. He'd signed a short-term lease downtown, a loft, minimalist, peaceful. This house was just a visit now. Then came the knock. Late Sunday morning, he almost didn't answer. It was Lisa. Hair done, voice soft. "I didn't think you'd be here." He let her in. She looked around, then spotted the car through the window. "You bought it?" she said, almost smiling. "It looks incredible." She stepped close, hugged him, said she missed him, asked for a second chance. He didn't answer. Then footsteps on the stairs. A young woman appeared wearing one of Paul's old t-shirts, hair tousled, smile sleepy. "Hey, I didn't know you had company." Lisa froze. Paul didn't speak, didn't explain, just watched Lisa process what she was seeing. She backed away, furious. "You have someone living here now, in our house?" He didn't respond to the noise, just walked to the entry table, pulled out a folder. Inside, screenshots, messages, doorbell footage, and a notarized separation agreement. Lisa flipped through it, hands shaking. "You saved all this?" "No. I documented what I needed to move on." She stared. "Is this because of her?" "No. She didn't replace you. She walked into the life you stepped out of." Lisa's face fell. You're really done. Paul didn't raise his voice. I'm just not begging anymore. She tried one last time. Tears, promises, apologies, therapy, change. He listened, then walked her to the door. You wanted space, he said. You got it. And he closed it gently behind her. Lisa didn't leave right away. She stood in the entryway holding the folder Paul had given her. Her voice cracked as she tried to hold herself together. He left me. Paul turned slightly. Who? The guy in the RS7, she muttered. He said I was too complicated. Said he found someone else. Paul didn't respond. He didn't need to. The words spoke for themselves. She laughed weakly, voice brittle. I know what I threw away. I've replayed it 1,000 times. Still, he said nothing. I thought you were too safe, too predictable. But you were just consistent, loyal. I didn't know how rare that was. Not until it was gone. Tears slid down her face, but Paul remained still. He wasn't angry. He wasn't cruel. He just wasn't interested in rewriting the past. She stepped closer, voice trembling. Can't we start over? I'll sign whatever you want. I'll go to therapy. I'll fight for this. He didn't move. I'm not angry anymore, Lisa, he said softly, and I'm not here to punish you. Then why are you doing this? She asked, frustration building. Because I don't need revenge. I just needed to remember who I am. Her mouth opened, maybe to argue, maybe to plead. But before she could find words, he opened the front door. She hesitated, eyes scanning his face for some opening, some hint of old affection she could still use, but there wasn't one. I'm finally someone I don't have to explain to, Paul said, and I'm not giving that up. He didn't slam the door, just closed it, firm, final. Outside, the street looked the same, but everything else had shifted. Paul stood there for a moment before walking back into the kitchen. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt steady, grounded. The young woman reappeared, coffee mug in hand. She okay? She asked. She will be, Paul said. That afternoon, he packed a few more things and returned to his downtown loft. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his. No ghosts, no tension, just space. Later that week, the Civic Center project officially kicked off. Paul was flown to Seattle for a meet and greet with the donor, an older entrepreneur who'd grown up in a neglected neighborhood and wanted to give something back. You built something honest, the donor said. People see that. Back in Portland, Paul's design was now headlining major blogs. Offers began trickling in. Lectures, interviews, consultations. For the first time in years, his career wasn't something he had to defend. It was something people respected. But the moment that marked a true shift wasn't a paycheck or a published feature. It was when Paul walked into the dealership again, not to buy, just to say thanks. And the salesman asked, "You think your wife's gonna love the car?" Paul smiled. "It's not for her." The salesman blinked. "Girlfriend then?" Paul shrugged. "It's for me." That night, back at his loft, Paul took out one of the new pencils. He sketched something simple, a public garden with open seating, free shade, and walking paths wide enough for wheelchairs. No big client, no bid, just something he wanted to create. He put the sketch in a folder labeled Next. A week later, Lisa sent a text. "I signed the papers. I hope you're okay." He didn't reply. There was no need. The signed papers arrived by mail a few days later. No note inside. No message. Just Lisa's signature next to his on every page. Paul opened the envelope at his kitchen counter, skimmed the pages, and placed them in the file cabinet he'd bought specifically for this chapter of his life. No ceremony, no relief, just completion. He didn't feel the need to call anyone, not even his closest friend from work. There wasn't anything to explain. Lisa's story had ended exactly the way she'd written it, by leaving and then trying to return after the damage had settled into fact. And now it was over. The next few weeks passed with a kind of quiet momentum. The Civic Center project kept him busy. Meetings, planning sessions, local approvals. People listened when he spoke. They respected his vision. He wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. One evening, while reviewing blueprints at a coffee shop, someone tapped his shoulder. It was the young woman from the house, Rachel. the one Lisa had seen walking down the stairs that morning. They'd only shared a few days together before she left town for work, and Paul hadn't expected to see her again. "I'm back in town," she said. "Didn't think I'd bump into you like this." Paul smiled. "Good timing." They talked for hours. Nothing romantic, nothing forced. Just two people who had met in an odd moment, now reintroducing themselves on even ground. She was thoughtful, funny in an unpolished way, and unlike Lisa, didn't fill silence to avoid it. They met again that weekend, a walk in the park. Another quiet dinner. Paul didn't try to impress her. He didn't need to. And Rachel didn't need to be impressed. One night she looked at him across the table and asked, "Do you ever think about going back?" "To Lisa?" he asked, surprised. Rachel nodded. Paul shook his head. "There's nothing to go back to. I didn't leave her behind. I moved forward." Rachel smiled at that. "Good." Later, as they walked back to her car, she asked, "Was the car really for you?" Paul laughed. "Every inch of it." She grinned. "I believe you." By mid-month, the Civic Center's groundbreaking ceremony was scheduled. Local news wanted to feature it. Paul declined most of the interviews but agreed to one, just one, for a community podcast. During the recording, the host asked, "You've had a big year. What changed?" Paul didn't pause. "I stopped building for approval and started building for impact." The host nodded. "And in your personal life?" Paul smiled faintly. "Same lesson." Back at home, he walked through the house one last time. His lease at the loft had been extended, and the suburban place where he and Lisa had shared a life was finally going on the market. He boxed up the last of his things, labeled them clearly, and left a key on the counter. He didn't walk through the room slowly. He didn't linger at the doorways. He didn't replay old conversations. He'd already said goodbye. That Saturday, Rachel helped him move the last few boxes. As they packed up his drawings, she paused at one of the early Civic Center drafts. "You ever think this design came out of all that chaos?" she asked. Paul thought about it, then nodded. "Yeah, but the best part isn't where it came from. It's where it's going." She smiled and tucked the blueprint carefully into the folder. They didn't label their relationship. There were no declarations, no late-night confessions, just time spent, freely. Paul liked it that way. One evening, a message came in from Lisa. Just one line. "I saw the podcast. You looked happy." He didn't reply, not out of bitterness, because there was nothing left to say. Lisa had once asked for space, and Paul had given it to her. What neither of them realized then was that space wasn't just distance, it was direction, and while she'd been trying to circle back, he'd already started walking forward. 6 months passed. The Civic Center project broke ground under a clear sky, cameras flashing, city council members shaking hands. Paul stood to the side, not seeking the spotlight, just watching it all come to life. He didn't need applause. Seeing the design take shape was enough. After the speeches, a young intern handed him a clipboard. "Mr. Reamer, press wants a statement." Paul looked over at the local reporters gathering near the podium. He shook his head. "Let the city take the credit." The intern hesitated. "They'll probably mention your name anyway." "That's fine," Paul said. "They can Google me if they care." Back at his loft that evening, Paul unrolled a new set of sketches, this time for a mixed-use housing project downtown. He'd been invited to join the city's planning advisory board. A year ago, he might have second-guessed himself. Now he just got to work. Rachel stopped by with takeout. They ate on the balcony, watching traffic drift by below. She didn't ask about the Civic Center. She already knew how much it meant. Later, as they loaded the dishwasher, Rachel glanced at him. "Has she tried contacting you again?" Paul knew who she meant. He nodded once. "She emailed a few weeks ago." "Did you answer?" "No." Rachel didn't press. She just nodded and continued stacking plates. Lisa's last message had been longer than usual, a reflection. Apologies. She said she'd finally started therapy. She wrote about regret, about all the ways she'd let things slide, how she confused comfort for boredom, loyalty for passivity. She said she understood now that Paul had been the one constant in her life when everything else felt unstable. Paul read the message once, then archived it, not because he was angry, Because he was free. One afternoon, while walking through a local park, he noticed a flyer posted near the playground. Community garden volunteers needed. It was the kind of project he used to pass by. Now he signed up on the spot. He spent Saturdays helping a retired vet organize supplies and rebuild planters. No big names, no donors, just a few people with time and dirt under their nails. That's where he felt it, the full circle. He wasn't designing to prove his value anymore. He was just part of something that worked. By fall, the downtown development team asked him to lead a design review board. It came with a title, a modest raise, and a quiet sense of respect from peers. No grand office, no gold plaque, just influence, used with care. And yet, for all the professional recognition, the moment that stuck with Paul happened at a small diner. He'd stopped for coffee, nothing special, and the waitress, a woman in her 60s, smiled at him and said, "You designed that civic center, didn't you?" He nodded. She tapped her chest. "My daughter's holding her wedding there next spring. Says it makes her feel proud of this town again." Paul smiled. Glad to hear it. As she walked away, he didn't feel accomplished. He felt steady. One evening, back at the loft, Rachel found an old sketchbook of his, pages from years ago, when he was still married. "These are different," she said. "They were hopeful," Paul replied. She looked at him. "And now?" He thought about it. "Now they're honest." He didn't rewrite history. He didn't romanticize what went wrong. Lisa had made choices. So had he. Some of them were made in silence, others in defense. But in the end, clarity came not through confrontation, but through action. He'd rebuilt from the inside out. He no longer carried the weight of Lisa's absence. He no longer needed her to see his worth. Because somewhere between the silence and the rebuilding, he'd started seeing it himself. Not as a perfect man, not as a victim, but as someone who kept showing up. Someone who didn't quit when it got quiet. That was enough.